thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We've got Mike Moyers from Slicing Pie, Paul Niederer and Fabricio Grugamolio attending to discuss Slicing Pie and its relevance and applications to startups and the world in general, but definitely in terms of Imagine Enterprises and the ecosystem that we're building here to support projects come to life in a much fairer way, in a way that I think the world needs to evolve, where, you know, people can work more collaboratively, peer-to-peer in a cooperative format. Intellectual properties can come together and be measured fairly and be made smart with AI intelligent apps on the spatial web. So ultimately, before we get into some of the questions and how that relates to, I suppose, some of the projects that are in our roadmap, Mike, I'd love for you to sort of, or everyone actually, I think, have a quick introduction and hello and introduce yourself. And then I think, Paul, it would be great to just get a foundational understanding for people out there of, you know, what was behind Slicing Pie, where it all came to life, and what you've seen, I suppose, evolve over the last sort of since inception of you rolling out the model. So, yeah, over to you, Mike, to introduce yourself. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I wrote the first white paper on Slicing Pie in 2010 after coming off a very uncomfortable equity split situation that took a while to not pay out. But I signed an agreement with with my co-founders. Two of us started a business, and we raised $5 million on a half-written business plan and a PowerPoint deck. And he was more experienced than I was by quite a bit. He'd been through some exits, and he wrote an operating agreement to cover his own butt. And I signed it. And when he exercised his right to buy my shares back for virtually nothing, I got some money, not much, he turned around and sold them for hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars. So I felt very burned by that situation. And I sat down kind of as a rant about the whole system of how equity is split up. So the first version was sort of a rant about, you know, what's really going on. And I published a white paper, and my experience before that was startup companies, and I went from sort of real job to startup company, from real job to startup company. And I had taken equity and done equity deals before. And the white paper turned into a book and a spreadsheet, and over the years, it has been revealed to me, I'll put it that way, about what makes it work and what doesn't make it work. And it's been about 10 years or 12 years since that time, and the book's been used by startups all over the world. And I've come to realize that it's by what fairness means to people is universal. If something is fair, you can tell it's fair. And what's nice about business is everything in business is quantifiable. So we can put a number on everything, literally everything. And that's a unique part of our lives. You can't do that with crime. You can't do that with relationships so much. You can't do that with, you know, entertainment, but you can quantify business. So because we can quantify business, we can calculate what's fair to everybody based on what they contributed. So Slicing Pie is basically an equity model that accounts for what people put at risk over time when during the stage of building a business from basically concept idea stage through Series A, first major round of funding, or if they break even.
Fantastic. Right now, I think, you know, I've obviously got some questions. I want to take the opportunity for Paul to, you're familiar with Slicing Pie. We had the phone call. Thank you very much for that, Mike. But Paul, you know, your experience dealing with startups, and then Fabricio, if you can both introduce yourself in that order and add some context, your thoughts on the initial foundations of Slicing Pie and your experience, I suppose, with similar things. I know I had that experience with giving shares, having to take them away, and so I understand with that, Mike. But yeah. Paul, over to you, sir. And you're on mute.
Well, I had around 300 raisings, so we had a fairly straitjacket approach to it because we told founders basically how to structure their startups. So there wasn't any fluidity or any tools like Mike had. We just had a standard formula. But So after 300 capital raisings, you realize that there's multiple people involved in these things. Everybody's got their own point of view. We had founders that when you started saying that somebody should have a better share, they said, well, I'm going to go home and bury the technology under the ground and it's going to be lost to humanity and things like that. So that was good experience. But after this, when I introduce or talk about Ilipa, I'll show some of the connections back to Mike that integrate with my experience and where things are going. But thanks, Dan.
Yeah, beautiful.
Can I ask you a question, Paul? When you were doing 300 raises, your business was raising money, right?
Yes, correct.
So it was
But
beneficial.
we raised it was a different model in which where the raiser was the company. It's a bit similar to you in some ways, and we provided all the tools for them to raise the money. That they didn't need a lawyer, they didn't need an accountant, and it was their raise. But we had all the support mechanism to do it. But at the end of the day, it was their raise.
So there's a benefit to having a standardized agreement in that case.
Yes, correct.
Because you don't have to modify it for everybody.
That's right.
Mythology that every business is different, but they're not all different. They're all, the standardization can make it much easier to go through the process and require a lot less intervention.
Absolutely. I don't think we had any court cases or any things in 300 races with people challenging anything at all. And was because the template worked.
Right. That's a lot more experience that I have in raising money for sure.
So, Fabricio, are you able to talk with your recording?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm recording on the second
Yep.
screen. I turned off the camera because otherwise you will have this infinite loop effect.
Okay.
It's not very nice to see.
Okay. Very
Yeah, so basically I'm a tech guy coming from different experience in W3C, IEEE, and other standardized organization since 2000. So it's a lot of time now. My experience in raising capital is obviously it's not 300. It's 5. Personally raised them. And now working with 2 network of investors where I taking care of the technical due diligence, but I see a lot of term sheets going through my person as well. And as Dan mentioned, I've been in Singularity for a lot of time, and now I'm in OpenXO as a consultant, coach, trainer, and something else. Sorry, I forgot now the different personas or hats I can wear in the organizations, where the goal is basically to try to generate something new, where my main goal usually is really try to generate new business model, try to generate new technology, and basically sell it after 1 or 2 years if I'm lucky enough to obviously bring this new model to life. So that's the short story.
fantastic. And I know Fabricio had some additional questions as well in terms of using it. I think one of the things, we might go to that now, is that, from rolling this out on an international level, and this is where we'll talk about the distributed ledger and enabling a bit more trust as well, but to be interoperable with, legal frameworks and paperwork admin systems internationally as a universal model. I think from the tax reporting side of things, there was some difficulties that Fabricio had with daily reporting or weekly reporting on tax. So what are your thoughts in terms of, it hasn't been done before, in terms of, you've said, in our last call, there's been some innovative stuff happen with the model, Mike. But in terms of setting up, say, for example, a static pool in a convertible or safe note, whether that's 15 or 20%, or there might be some metrics of how this could actually work, having that pool set aside for funding, so then there's no value until there's a conversion event that happens with that convertible or safe note. And as you state, and as the model, it's a theoretical value that's within each portion of the pie until, so we know that blockchain can enable that trust. It's got its unit values, and there's this pool of 75 or 80% that's working on dynamic equity with the contributions, and that separate component where money is separate. Do you think that is a model that can work and keep that trust-based, zero value until MVP or till the product comes out? Or is the other contributions that can potentially be made also got the financial aspect where it's going to be creating that value? You think that's a sound plan we can roll out, or how would you go about that, Mike?
So I know what you're saying, and I know what your intention is there. It's so there, but in my experience, it's not a necessary construct. This idea of holding back a certain percentage. One thing that I encourage people to avoid is predicting future events. We can't predict what's going to happen. I don't know how much we're going to raise. I don't know what terms we're going to raise it at. I don't know who we're going to raise it from. I don't know when we're going to raise it. So I can't predict what's going to happen. So when I set a line in the sand at 20% or 10% or 5%, I'm assuming a certain number of, I'm making a certain number of assumptions that my valuation will, and the amount of money that I raise will just serendipitously turn into 20%. So it doesn't help the model become more fair. I mean, it helps become less fair. I think of investment as sort of three groups of investors. You have participants in the startup who are foregoing current compensation and reimbursement of expenses. I call them grunts. The model was originally called a grunt fund. And I think of people who invest their own money in amounts that are too small to fund the operation. They're usually called mom or dad or angel investors or friends. And then there's a third type of investor, which is a professional investor who invests other people's money in amounts that are large enough to fund your operation. And they're usually called venture capitalists. So initially, you can't set a valuation for your company. It's not practical for a number of reasons, and it's not possible for a number of reasons. It's not practical from a tax standpoint and legal standpoint. It's not possible because you can't predict the future. At the idea stage, you just don't know what's going to happen. So during that zero valuation stage, that's when slicing pie applies, and people who are foregoing salary and compensation will use the pie. When money comes in with a safe note or a convertible loan or whatever else you implement, those tools can often bring to the table a lot of restrictions and rules like 20% or valuation caps and discount rates, things like that, that may or may not be compatible with the future because things might change. But I recommend those tools because I don't want people to put a valuation on. Those tools generally push the valuation back to the first Series A round. But I always want people to avoid setting the valuation to the Series A round. Once you set a Series A round, you're raising enough money to fund your operation. That means you can price your shares and use the investment to pay people's salaries and expenses. So slicing pie goes away at that point, and the note holders would convert. And then there's all kinds of shenanigans that VCs pull. They can put in equity pool for stock options or management carve outs and things like that. That's when it really matters because that's when the shares have a value and they can use them at a stated value. But during that sort of angel bridge round, there's no real underlying value. So I hesitate to carve off any percentages for future allocation because just you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, copy. Well, look, I think Fabricio and Paul, if you'd like to jump in, I know Paul, Fabricio had some experience with complications with slicing pie. Maybe we can cover if you want to touch on that. I just a bit of food for thought, though. I think with the enterprise thinking that we're going to encourage for businesses to not just stick to one product and model, to have a diversity, given that's the opportunity with this autonomous AI applications and it's rolling out on the spatial web and they can de-risk themselves, that slicing pie will continue to be part of maybe subsidiary companies. We'll talk about that as a separate question, potentially, and dive deeper. Let's take note of that. But Fabricio, did you want to add some context to that particular model and the experience you had with slicing pie and reporting and tax and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean the main issue I implemented around 6 times, not a lot of time, but in different contexts, mainly with startups, especially, for example, now in OpenExo, for example, there's one case, or I had some example in Foundry Institute as well. One of the main, let's say, not written rule is about the number of hours you will put in weekly and how you allocate, or at least you will decide before allocating what will be the right amount of hours. So let's say the slicing part will cover the accounting very well, and obviously you need to integrate it with something else. Sorry. For example, in our case, after different tentative, we integrate the slicing pie as an accountability tool with, for example, OKR to define what is fair to account for this amount of time. Because the typical example I do all the time is, hey, last week I spent 1,000 hours to taking picture of hamsters, and that's, as you can understand, is not very relevant. But anyway, you put 100 hours or 1,000 hours, so it's that's the problem we met in different situations where obviously when you have different members, that you have a core member, you have satellite members, where we can call community and crowd and other stuff. It's, if you don't coordinate them, I see there's a little risk to lose value. So that was my experience, and I was curious to see if it happens to you. Do you provided or you envision additional tools that could help to cover this, let's say, potential loss of meaning in the hour you're putting, and then in the way you will divide the pie?
Yeah, that's a common, not unusual observation is this whole idea that I could put in more hours, or I could waste a lot of time, or charge the company in ways that are not constructive. I always ask people to come back to what they would do if they were paying someone cash. And slicing pie takes the, turns in, there's an abstraction there because you're not dealing with actual cash. But if you think about it in terms of actual cash, if you had someone who spent 100 hours a week not being productive, and you're paying them actual cash, you would pay them the cash that you owe them, but you would hesitate the next time around. So you'd say, well, what's going on here? Why are you spending 100 hours taking pictures of whatever you're taking pictures of?
Yes.
So that's a conversation you'd have with somebody. And that's a management issue, not a slicing pie issue.
Correct.
So you still got to manage it properly. So there's a couple of things that protect, that are part of the management process that will protect people. The first one is, if you have someone who's adding extra hours or not very productive, that could be grounds for termination. And termination with cause is essentially forfeiting your bet. So if you book 100 hours with no productivity one week, and the next week you do it again, and the third time you get fired, and you'd lose your slices. So the company's protected against that kind of behavior. The other thing that is useful, and the slicing pie software is actually a beta feature set in there now, which is performance management. I always encourage you to you can't predict the future, but you can plan for future events. So plan on what productivity means to the team. That's often part that's overlooked, because because you're not getting paid, people often feel a little slow to implement structured management techniques. But if you do, you always act as if you are going to pay. So setting goals and milestones for what people are expected to do, and then holding them accountable for things they don't do. And one thing that's nice about slicing pie is, if someone's terminated for cause, they would lose their equity. And people come and go from company. What you don't want is an unproductive person joining the team, taking a chunk of equity, and then leaving with that equity and having to fight about it later. Slicing pie doesn't allow that, because there's mechanisms in place to get rid of them. So if the management is getting off the rails, then that's something that you got to check on. And if it does, there's a cure for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Paul, did you have any questions before we move on, mate?
No, good, thanks.
Okay, too easy. Thank you very much for that, Mike. Good questions, Fabrizio. So I think there's a couple of major things I wanted to sort of touch on in terms of the first stage right now is the future you to power up leaders, right, Mike, around the future you and the incubator that we're building for startups, right, for businesses. But then there's also this scenario. It's probably a two-pronged question, because existing businesses need to innovate, else they're going to be potentially like Kodak, that overnight. Just goes away. There's a lot of shifts going on with technologies. There's a convergence. There's 25 plus Gutenberg moments. AI, everyone's talking about. We know it's getting more mainstream, and it's a huge part of the convergence of technologies. But so I think going back to the first part of the question, right, we've got the Future You program, which is tied into a membership for our cooperative platform. Right, this will evolve into a DAO, and as we have these conversations and governance and whatnot. But at the moment, how do you see, or what have you seen in the past in terms of, say, if we've got affiliates of the Future You program, and we've even got leaders, podcasters, masterminds, people with an existing audience that can make money by introducing and supporting our network, but we attribute them for the relationship introduction edged in stone. And this will come back to you, Paul, with the Ilipa and keeping a blockchain record that there's no doubt that Mike introduced Paul, for example. So what is some of the variances in those models? And have you seen that in the past where you might have, say, an influencer or whatnot that is being able to support the community building, the sales from a product, so they're an affiliate of a membership or a product, but then get attributed for a relationship introduction for a particular project? Have you seen that before? If not, maybe what are your thoughts on us rolling out a model like that, Mike?
So what's nice about this is, like I said before, everything in business is quantifiable, but it may not be immediately obvious how it's quantifiable, unless you go back to what you would pay if you were paying. So people don't work for free forever. They can come on board on your team. They're eventually want to get paid, and the amount that they're going to get paid is the fair market value. So if you bring on an influencer who's making introductions, they may do that for free for a little while. Eventually, they're going to want to get paid, and their business model dictates how they get paid. And whatever they present to you is what they expect to get paid, and you can take it or leave it. So if I'm an influencer and I typically charge $1,000 for tweeting on my platform, or if it could be a finder's fee for a new user, you got to negotiate that up front. I had a guy come look at my trees today to trim the trees, and he gave me a quote for my trees, and I thought it was too expensive, so I'm not going to hire him. It's much better to know in advance what I'm expected to pay, so I can decide if I want to move forward or not. Now, if I was starting a company, I could either pay the guy or pay him slices in the pie. So the first thing you do is say, if you're going to get paid, how much you get paid, and then put those agreements in writing or into the model, and try to acquire resources consistently. So you might say, once you figure out the model for one influencer or one mentor, for instance, you say, if you're a mentor, here's how we pay you. Your rate's going to be based on X, Y, Z. Put together some guidelines. So the first step is always the same. How much would you pay if you're going to pay? And when you think of the Future You organization, the organization that's above all this, you're providing services, right? You're providing mentorship, and people are going to pay you a monthly fee. Is that the idea?
So I missed that last part, Mike.
The idea is your revenue stream is a monthly fee.
Correct.
So they can either pay you that monthly fee in cash, or you can take it in slices in their pie. So as you have a menu of items of things that you can provide to someone. You can provide legal support or accounting support or mentorship or marketing support. And those things you can explain to people how much they cost. People can either pay you for them or allocate slices. So the key is always to understand what you'll be paying up front, and then either pay for it if you have cash or use slices if you don't.
Okay. And in terms of the relationship model, right? What have you seen that's worked best? Is there expired time frames? I mean, I started to build some smart contract with them expiry at around 6 months. Could be longer. Could be. Is there ever been sort of a couple of tiers? Because if you've got an influencer or someone that's going to introduce their introductions, it's always another scenario as well. So have you ever seen those 2 tiers and time frames? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's lots of ways that I've talked to people on how to pay people. If you can track individual success rates with those audiences, so that can be tracked down to the lead fee. If you're paying an affiliate price on that, you can pay an affiliate price. So it just depends on what that influencer wants. A lot of influencers will charge you whatever they can get away with, or what it is. They don't know much more than you do. So it's a matter of researching the market a lot. There's different kinds of relationships. There's relationships that turn into investors. There's relationships that turn into customers. There's relationships that turn into employees or partners or things like that. Sometimes the relationship brings a certain amount of savings to the table. So if I introduce you to a partner that can provide a service at a lower cost, the benefit I provided is savings. So I got to figure out what's the benefit, the financial benefit to that relationship, and how can I compensate somebody for it. So it always ties into what makes sense. If you can't find an answer, you got to make it up, or maybe it's not really that valuable in the first place.
Gotcha. Well, I think there's some documentation coming together where we'll have some continued conversations to land on some models across the whole ecosystem. I'm just going to chuck it out there in terms of, and then we can do a bit of a round Paul and Fabricio, a bit of a round table. But in terms of a hybrid model, right? In terms of people need to get paid, they need to survive these days. They'd love to work on this purpose-driven project, but I've got kids to feed, right? So they've got a standard hourly rate. In terms of getting paid potentially half of what their hourly rate would be and the other half going into dynamic equity, is it fair enough to just give them that quantifiable, multiplier based on the phase of the project, just as if they were taking a full in equity and getting the other? You wouldn't penalise them at all? What do you see sort of working best in terms of a balanced model with some money in the hand, some money in the table?
So that's the beauty of the model, is it only takes into account the unspent, the non-compensation. So if I'm worth $50 an hour and you pay me $50 an hour, then I don't deserve any equity because I'm getting paid in full. If you pay me less than $50 an hour, the unpaid portion is my bet. I always like to think about it as a game of blackjack. And in blackjack, the analogy is, do you know how to play blackjack?
Yeah.
So let's pretend you and I are going to play blackjack as a team, not opponents, as a team. And we're going to split the winnings 50-50 because we're friends. So we go to the table and we each put $1 on the same hand of blackjack. We don't know if we're going to win. We don't know how much we're going to win. We don't know how long it's going to take to win. We can't tell the future. We know for certain is we each bet $1. So dealer deals 2 aces. We're going to split the aces and double down our bets because I'm out of money and you're not. So you put $2 more on to cover our bets. Now you bet $3 and I bet $1. We still don't know the future if we're going to win or how much we're going to win. We know for certain is you bet 3 and I bet 1. At that point, our deal for 50-50 isn't fair anymore because your bets are greater than mine. So you should get 75%, I should get 25%. So when I don't get paid my full fair market value, whatever I'm not paid is my bet. So as the company starts earning money, they can start paying me money and my bets go down over time until I go down to 0. So if I pay someone full fair market value from day one, they don't deserve any equity. If I pay them nothing from day one, they deserve equity that reflects their bet on the table. So I always go back to blackjack and say, well, what are my bets on the table? If you're working for a year for at $100,000 and you draw out $50,000, your bets have gone down. So I'm buying down your bets. So you look at the part that's not paid out. That part may never be paid out because it's not a loan. It's a bet on the table. So it all boils down to bets on the table. So paying partly in cash and partly in non-cash is very common. Now, if you are worth $50 an hour and I'm worth $50 an hour and you need money and I don't, I can work for no money and you can work for $25 an hour, say. If the company has no money, I may pay you that $25 an hour out of my pocket. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I pay you $25 an hour and I don't get paid $50 an hour because I'm bringing it at risk, and you're putting $25 an hour at risk. So you get 50 slices of the pie every time you work for an hour because it's times 2 for non-cash. So for every hour you work, though, I get 100 slices because I'm getting $25 cash. So your incentive now is I'm building equity much faster than you are. So your incentive is to not take the cash if you can possibly avoid it, which is the incentive that I want. I want you to be incentivized not to take cash. And I'm incentivized to put in cash, which is what I want. So people have an incentive to put in cash and not to draw cash out. So we can conserve cash very well and start going with that. So I'm also getting 200 slices per hour or 100 slices per hour for my time that I'm not getting paid. So the multipliers allow people to put in cash or not put in cash, take out cash or not take out cash, and have their incentives properly aligned. So it's very common that someone would do that. And it makes people think twice before they draw cash out. But if you need cash, you need cash. There's nothing wrong with that. You need cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great response. I want to hand over to Paul or Fabricio. Any questions over the last 10 minutes of comments, questions for myself or with Mike? Feel free. Go, Paul.
No, I'm all good, thanks.
All good, Fabricio?
Oh, I have a question. I would like to. I love the metaphor used in blackjack for slicing pie. Thank you, Linda. That's the first time I heard it. That's amazing. And the question is, Dan before mentioned the opportunity to have obviously some smart contract in place, and Paul, with his experience of 300 raises, went through the different cycles of what you just mentioned in the startups or companies. So during these cycles, the multiplier are not always fixed. At the beginning, you can have 4 per time or 4 per money. Sorry, 4 per money, usually one time. But I was wondering if, in your experience, you already met some kind of standardization in these, how can I call it, startup phases. When you start working with no money, when the first money come in, and then you raise the first capital and blah, blah, blah. And if you think about this kind of phases, a multiplier can be somehow entering what Dan mentioned with smart contract or something that give us more structure and more, again, it's more a management problem, but it's very connected with this, what you just mentioned.
So the multipliers are there to normalize the difference between cash and non-cash. So if I paid you $100 an hour to work for me, and you wanted to buy something that cost $100, like this mouse, it would take you more than an hour to earn enough money. Because when I paid you, I pay employment taxes and Social Security taxes. When you receive the money, you pay income taxes. And when you bought the thing, you pay sales tax. So there's a big tax implication and cost implication to getting cash and using cash. Plus, I need to have incentive to get cash out of your hands. So originally, there were 3 multipliers. There was a 1 multiplier, a 2 multiplier, and a 4 multiplier. So I did a study about 10 years ago. I went through tax rates and employment tax rates and interest rates and time value of money for every country that I could find information on, which is a lot. And it worked out to be about 50%, that the buying power of dollars was reduced about 50% from what you earned. So if I earn $100 an hour, I don't take home $100 an hour, and I don't have buying power of $100 an hour. I have less than that. So that's where I came up with the 2 and the 4. The 1 applied to things that I originally thought were negligible, like using someone's garage, for instance. But I gradually came to realize that those things have market values too. So I switched to a 2 and 4 multiplier. So they don't account for the risk you might lose something. So if risk goes down over time, that would imply that you change the multipliers, but it's not. That's not what they're for. They're designed to smooth out the differences between cash and non-cash on a global basis. Mm-hmm. Now, some countries don't have the income tax. I think in Dubai there's no income tax, but on a global basis it's about 50%. Some countries have really high taxes. So in order to make it a global system, I'm standardize it. Now you could use 1 and 2, cash and non-cash and cash, but I took away the 1 multiplier and I kept it 2 and 4 just because it was easier. Plus it obscures the number of the actual cash that's been contributed. I don't people think that a dollar if investment equals $1 a slice. I don't think there's a price to a slice. So the risk that someone might lose it will depend on your interest rates and other things, which you can tweak in different ways. But if I lower my cash multiplier, for instance, I'm undervaluing the cash that's put in. So I always recommend people kind of stick to those if they can.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're up, yeah, cool. Look, so for the time we've got left today, my last sort of major question is in regards to, I was sort of touching it before, with existing businesses that, can co-compete, right, and create. We've got older softwares, let's say, people that might be and this is a real life scenario with some technology pieces in part of, what we're doing, Mike, where combining those particular softwares together and those intellectual properties and then making them smart by building an AI intelligent application on the spatial web and versus AI operating system benefits those businesses to have something new and innovative combining them together. They're interoperable through the HSML protocol and data lens, and they're able to work together much the same as any blockchain moving forward. So in terms of combining IPs and a business being enterprise type thinking and being able to become a leader in this space, exponential business, building on the spatial web, and then be able to go out and do deals with other peers, in their industry. What's the, they could hand over a duplicate version of that IP, or they could license that, or how would you see this moving? I think it's a big part of business moving forward. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as a continuous model.
So once it always comes back to what's the fair market value of it? Is there a license price for it? Is there a purchase price for it? Is there exclusivity for it? You negotiate that contract as if you were going to pay for it. And then if you don't pay for it, that's a bet. Now, one of my dreams about slicing, one of the things that gets me excited is if you have two companies using slicing pie, all you got to do is add their pies together, and that gives you the right split. So it's as long as they're in the formation stage, just add them together. Now, if the companies are established, then those prices can be determined based on the value of the company. So if I can do a evaluation for both companies and add them together, then they're each putting in a certain amount of valuation, more or less. And I'm not a mergers and acquisition expert, but that's generally how it would work. But in slicing pie, you simply add the slices together to see what the pie looks like. Or you can do a third. Each company can provide services to a new company, either for cash or for not cash. And I always ask people to think about sending an invoice. I'm going to provide services to your new company. I'm going to send you an invoice for my time and expenses. You can either pay the invoice, in which case we're square, or you can pay part of the invoice, in which case some of it converts to slices. And once that bet is placed, that bet is it's not paid back later. It's a bet, and it turns into equity according to the logic of slicing pie. So I really look for to the extent that AI can combine things and build bridges between software applications, that will lower the cost of doing this dramatically. And I always tell people the reason that technology exists is to lower our transaction costs. And AI is certainly going to lower transaction costs for a lot of things. And so these lower the cost of doing it, and it's the speed at which you can do it too. So as long as but still, all companies with AI, without AI, are tracking expenses, are tracking salaries, are tracking these things. As long as they track what they're not spending, they can use slicing pie to combine things. And that's a discipline that won't go away no matter what technology is in place, is that most companies track these things.
I love it. And I think that's going to be a good segue into yourself, Paul, to speak to more of the blockchain getting rolled out. I think definitely that new entity and contributions being made is going to be the major part of our systems, Paul, and everyone on the call. But just as a bit of a note internally as well, there is some business brokers within our network, and within that is also the auditing process, which would be good to streamline through the process of onboarding, Paul, and record keeping with Ilipa potentially. So so with that said, I mean, there's some other questions I got here, but we've got sort of 15 minutes left to just do some I think I definitely want Paul to talk and for Mike to speak more now to the blockchain and Ilipa Capital. So Paul, maybe would you like to start in just introducing what's rolling out there with Ilipa, and then any relevant questions and use case and models and that you'd like to cover. Let's switch to that mode now, Paul.
Yeah, well, one of the problems often with small businesses is the accounting side of things, that people use different accounting programs, and if they've got 2 or 3 entities, they've got to pay $40 or $50 a month for each entity. Their accountants can import them into their software and all sorts of things like that. But What Ilipa decided to do was to look at the models like the online versions of QuickBooks and Xero and different software and see how can we do this in a different way. And so their whole concept was to create an online accounting solution that was free or relatively free for most small businesses. But they had another dimension to it, that if we were a venture capital company or something like that, that was investing in these, then we could mandate as part of our investment that they use this particular software. So there was visibility over it. All of the investments of a particular VC or venture capitalist or startup investor could be aggregated up to show an overall picture and things like that. So the idea was to make accountancy more affordable, easier to use for people, and it was ability to aggregate it for entities or across all of your entities that you had. If you had several, you could actually get a picture of all of those. So that's on the one side. And then the other side, they said, well, okay, well, that's good. We've got that visibility. How can we help with capital raising? So Ilipa has also decided that they have a capital raising platform that people can put the raises up there so that they're compliant in most countries around the world, and so that the capital can be raised as well. So you've got the initial stage of raising the capital, and then you've got the monitoring and managing it from accounting sense relative to the investors. And so this is where it fits really nicely into Slicing Pie, in that the decisions that are made as to what people get, what the shareholdings are, things like that can be built into the accounting protocols that they're in there, and then it can be communicated as part of the shareholder side of the register and what people get communicated with. So it fills in that the capital raising aspect of it, so that it's online, it's visible, the ongoing monitoring and recording of it, but it can be driven by the protocols and contract arrangements determined in Slicing Pie. So that's how I see all of that fitting together, Dan.
No, that's beautiful. And I suppose, Mike, from your perspective and what you've thought about in terms of rolling that out in the past, and I've sent you the Ilipa document, did you have any questions or, I suppose, comments, thoughts in regards to integration and the benefits for those records to be kept on the blockchain?
I mean, if you can, whenever you can standardize a pool of entities, then you can smash them together or tear them apart or invest. You're going to get to move much faster, and you can. There's a lot of cool things you can do. The accounting software that's available now for most startups is overkill for what they're doing. You're not doing terribly complex accounting in the early stages, and if you are, you're maybe over investing in it. I don't know every startup, but and certainly in terms of auditing and things like that. When I look at investors, if you have a Slicing Pie company and you're an investor, you don't have to do due diligence on them in advance. You can just start paying their bills and see how they work with you, and then if you like them, then you continue investing cash. If you don't like them, you can pull out. And so standardized accounting system will make it much faster. The investment into startups is a very burdensome process for the investor and the founder. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of research, and then you have to throw a lump of cash over the fence and hope that it works. But with standardized tools and standardized concepts, and you can roll things out much more quickly and easier.
That's true, Mike, because often the visibility is not there, is it? Like you'll ring up the managing director, and even if you own 50% of the company, they'll say, "Oh, look, no, we'll get the accounts out to you soon. Our accountant's a bit slow, but things have been going well and everything like that." But if you've got visibility into the accounting side of it, you'll be able to see what were last month's invoices or what was last month's expenditure, and if you've got a plan, an investment plan of what you're going to spend your money on, and then relative to that, you can see it in a nice, easy table that shows we were going to spend on IT 180,000 and we've spent 460, then there's something seriously wrong there.
Yeah, and some of those bills you can count as bets, and some of those bills you have to pay.
Correct. So Ilipa's interesting in that regard, because if you were to look at the States, you've got QuickBooks. For small businesses, what are the main packages you use there? Is it QuickBooks, and what's the other one?
QuickBooks is what we use here. I hate it.
Yeah. So most of them would be QuickBooks, I suppose. The rest of the world now predominantly shifted over to an online platform out of New Zealand called Xero, Xero.
I've heard of that one.
It's huge outside of America, and like in Australia, you could say we had QuickBooks was by far, well, MYOB, Mind Your Own Business, was originally a Macintosh program out of the US that was brought back to Australia, and then they developed it and it totally dominated the Australian market. So MYOB in Australia is first, and then QuickBooks and Xero, but Xero will be taking over all of them. But, you know, in many ways, it's like you said, they've got all sorts of report writers, and they've got allowances for so many accounting aspects that they don't even use, really. And it's relatively simple. They're basically cash businesses, startups, but they get overcomplicated by multiple menus and multiple things. And the idea of Ilipa is to simplify it from an investor's point of view, so that they can just see what they need to see from that platform. So after you raise the capital, there'll be promises in there. The promises will be embedded in the accounting program, and then they'll be able to monitor it relative to those promises.
Awesome.
So apologies as well, guys. I missed, my computer was having a little bit of a fit over the last 5 minutes, so I did miss 5 minutes of the conversation, so apologies. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. We'll have some follow-up calls with Jamie and Paul. He's integrating the banking model where startup wants to have been involved for a period of time, and because it's tied in to interrogate the accounts and be able to have transparency in that he can provide lines of credit. Yeah, and then through to equity placements as well, as Paul said, with the AML and KYC taken care of. So I just think, through that process, regardless of, we need to be able to, it's a trust-based system, slicing pie. So to be able to put that onto the blockchain, which he's connected to Hyperledger, and to the point of MVP and product having success, Mike, that there's anyone that wants to liquidate their shares is already partnered with 14 other exchanges to provide that secondary liquidity. So, I think between the people that are around us now and all the plans and the white paper, that there'll be some simplified versions of what we can do, integrating that straight away to start supporting businesses coming through the courses, Mike, and then we can start to evolve and get a bit innovative with some things. So I think for the purpose of today, we can start to wrap it up, and just any final thoughts and questions that anyone's got. And Fabricio, Mike, and then...
No, I'm good. I've got another one started. Got to prepare for at 9:55, so that's good for me. So I'm all good.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for joining, Paul, and look forward to the next one. Fabricio, did you have anything before we start to sign off, mate?
No, all good. And thanks a lot, Mike, for the explanation and the details. And nice to meet you, Paul. This was very nice to hear about your new venture and new opportunity we're offering to startups. Very exciting.
Beautiful. So, hey, Mike, thank you, and everyone, for joining. And again, the start of much conversations moving forward. And I think there's some content that most people, if you're not familiar, you'll see Mike adding some content within the Web3 XO programs and even future use. So, there's the previous content that Mike has, but we're looking to, as an innovative, forward-thinking company, to just continue pushing the boundaries and ultimately with the same goal of making sure that there's fairness in, I suppose, foundational companies coming to life and ideas come to life, whether they're business or creative, and being able to adapt to everything that's going on with the spatial web and with AI intelligent apps and blockchain and all what have you. So there'll be many more conversations moving forward, and think tanks, masterminds. So if you guys have any questions following up from this meeting, feel free to communicate those. And thanks again, Mike, Paul, Fabricio. Look forward to the next conversations.
Thank you very much.